Alright, so we're on our way to go get the car, get it ready to move. So if this video is uploaded, car made it to our house.
Yeah, so picked this up back in 2009 and had my heart set on a project car that wasn't already rusty, and it seemed like the best idea. So
Up in New England, those are hard to come by.
yep, exactly. First project was an MG Midget, and that was thoroughly rusty. So after that I was like, okay, can go for this, and worked on it a couple of years. Life got in the way, and it's kind of been hanging out for ever since. So looking forward to getting it finally together and out on the road or on the track, or
Yeah.
ideally
Or both.
Yes. But it's, you know, it's been sitting dry and just ready and willing.
So Factory 5 GTM, they probably made under 1,000 of these. I don't have the exact numbers, but we can do some research on it. It is a 2,300 pound, 2,400 pound car when finished. It runs a Corvette LS engine. So right now we have a LS1 from a mid 90s, late 90s Corvette, and it runs a Porsche transaxle in the back. So for each one of these, you know, with the LS6, with the, I think it's the LS6, with the 400 horsepower LS, it runs 0 to 60 in about 3.2 seconds. So it should be in the mid threes, just as it sits today. So it's going to be a very fast car and a very fun project. As you can see, the car's been sitting around for quite some time, and there's some dust. Luckily, everything was packed pretty tightly in the car itself, and as you can see, the seats and everything are wrapped, everything's been protected, and all the parts look to be still in good condition, except for the body, which needs quite a bit of work. Now we have the engine here, we have the transmission. I need to make sure that I change the fluids on these to make sure everything's okay. This transmission hasn't rotated in many years, and this engine definitely hasn't run in many years either. Now, before we move the car, we're going to clean it so that none of the stuff makes it to my place. Luckily, with the 2,300 pound car, it was easy to roll to get it to the street, to get picked up by the trailer. Whee!
Slow down. There you go. Whee!
One of the important parts for me is after we got the project here was to get everything organized, because if you can't find the parts and you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to be in a good place. So we spent the good part of Sunday afternoon cleaning, organizing, and making sure we knew where everything was. So on the front of the chassis, the first thing we're going to look at, we have a radiator system out of a Corvette. This is out of an LS1 Corvette, so it's out of I think it was out of a 97 Vet with 2 electric fans. Right behind that, we have where the battery's gonna go. So small battery underneath there, probably needs some weatherproofing so nothing gets completely soaked all the time. Then we have our braking system here, which should include the front brakes, the rear brakes, and a hydraulic clutch for the transmission. Now, in the car itself, it's extremely simple. You have a steering wheel. The steering wheel, I believe the assembly is out of a Corvette. The rack is out of actually I think the rack here is custom for this car. And the suspension, as you'll see here, it's all Corvette components. So they were all taken out of that 1997 Corvette that my friend was able to get. And the suspension's Coney coilovers specifically made for this vehicle. Now we have a Willwood brake setup. You can see in there we have Willwood brake, Willwood clutch, and then the gas pedal. The dash is going to go there. The gauges, actually it's probably going to go like this. The gauges need to be drilled into it. For the gauges, we have an odometer set up there that came with the car. This is going to need some work. So this is the shifter. It's not welded in place. I got to find a good way to mount that on the chassis itself. Then on the passenger side of the car, you can see this vehicle is actually going to have air conditioning. So it's a vintage air system here that's run off of the Corvette compressor. So we should be able to put AC in it. Making our way back, we have a hole for the parking brake. And then we have 2 gas tanks. So there's going to be a gas tank on both, right behind the driver and then right behind the passenger. These 2 tanks are actually connected underneath. You can see it right there to there, using one giant, I think it's a 16 AN tube. So we're going to be connecting those together. These tanks here are only held in by compression. So what that's going to mean is they're not bolted down, even though they are aluminum, and it gives me an opportunity to bolt them down that if I want. They don't have any place to bolt them down. So I believe maybe the Corvette tanks were like this too, but I'm not sure. You take them and then you compress them behind it using these foam, and it holds it in place. So both tanks are on there. Not sure how I feel about that, and especially being just directly behind the driver. I know you build a firewall out of all of this aluminum here, but we shall see. Now, on the engine, there's a lot of wiring to do. I helped them wire the injectors on this to get up here. It's running a custom harness, and it's gonna go up to the stock Corvette ECU. And the reason why we need to do that is because we need to get this inspected where we live, especially if we want to register the car. If we didn't want to register it, we could probably get away with using one of the Holly ones. Just to make sure everything's buttoned up now, want to make sure that they can plug it into an OBD2 port if necessary, and we can get it to go. So I think I'm going to end up spending a lot of time here on this wiring, and then trying to get everything together so that I can run the Corvette ECU on this engine. So for the engine, it is a 97 Corvette LS1 engine. It's completely stock. You can see it's really well shoehorned in here. Now if the driver's seat's going to be right here, then the engine's going to be right here, literally behind an aluminum firewall. And then feeding that is going to be, there's going to be an aeromotive pump down there, brake lines you can see in there as well. And then there's a lot of work to do, especially with all the fuel system. It has giant rims and tires on it, which right now are pointed in the complete wrong direction. That side and that side. And then it's running a Porsche G50 transmission. So this would be out of early 90s Porsche, I believe. And rear wheel drive. It can handle the power of the LS1. Not sure how much more power it can handle, but that's all set up for us. And then the exhaust is going to run up, and it's going to come out the back above the frame. We have the catalytic converters for it since we need them to get registered in this area. Again, the rear suspension out here is from a Corvette. So you have the A-arms, upper and lower. You have a specific Coney shock from factory 5 that's going to be on this car. Now, one of the interesting things about this car, and what I'm going to end up having to do, is a lot of this is held in by rivets. You can see all around the car, we have the Cleco rivets on them right now that's holding everything together, but all these panels here have to be riveted in to be able to hold in place. You know, I'm going to try to decide, there's probably some areas, especially down here, where the fuel system's going to be. I'm probably going to end up using self-tapping screws in this area just because it's going to be an area that I want to get into when I'm working on the car or if something goes wrong. So there are going to be some areas where there'll be rivets, and there's definitely going to be some areas where there's going to be screws. Now, this wiring, everything's labeled, which is good, but it's kind of a mess, and it's going to be quite a pain to get everything right and routed. Now for the steering column, you can see a lot of the Corvette parts. So all this is out of a Corvette. You have the wipers here. You have a factory 5 cover plus horn. You have your ignition here. And then you have your turn signals. I think cruise control and turn signals, yep. Then your Corvette key. So you can see when looking at the chassis, there's really nothing to it. I mean, it's only going to weigh 2,300 pounds. So even with a 350 horsepower engine, it's going to be really fast. Should be fun to corner with as well. Now for the coolant system on these cars, I hear there's a problem where a lot of you get hydrolocked up there just because the engine is actually above the radiator. Not only do we need to put a Corvette style overflow tank or coolant tank there, we also need to put an overflow tank or up in the back here. And I believe that's what this is. So we're gonna have to find a good place to mount that. I'm assuming some of the aluminum structure is gonna go here. With the way the car is set up right now, there's not a lot of aluminum on it, but there's an entire pile of it over there. So I gotta figure out what goes where, start laying things out. Also, looking at all these panels here, I'm going to need to buy an electric rivet gun because there's no way I'm going to be doing these all by hand. Now for the body, it's actually completely fiberglass and it's really light. I'm able to just carry this around myself, but it's been sitting outside for quite a while and it's gotten some damage to it. You know, if you look at here, I think a tree actually fell on a branch and ended up cracking right next to where the headlight's going to go, and there's another crack down in that area. So this needs to get cleaned up. This is going to be a lot of work to clean up and a lot of work to fix. You can see the mold lines on it. You know, these are going to be a lot of work. Coming out of the mold like this, you know, there's a lot of flashing on it that needs to be taken care of. So these are all going to need to be ground down and fixed, but you can see they go all the way around the body. Probably gonna end up using an angle grinder on them or some sort of very abrasive pad to get them flat, and then going across the entire thing to make it acceptable. Now, one of the good things about the car is it comes with a 750 plus page manual of how to build it. Now, great, it's all in PDF, but reading about it on the forums, a lot of people just use the manual as a guide, it seems. It's not that great. The instructions aren't that great. I was looking at putting some of the hinges on this week and just seeing how they looked on the car. And the manual, I mean, it tells you what goes where, but it doesn't tell you what's the hardware you really should use, or you need to have a good knowledge of how cars go together. So looking at building this car is definitely not for a novice to build. It's for someone that's had a lot of experience in building these, or building cars, I would say. I wouldn't say you need to have built kit cars in the past, but definitely someone that's had a lot of experience in building cars. Then on the other side, we have the body. So right now I'm storing the body in the workshop, and you know, as you can see, the body's pretty rough and it's going to need a lot of work. Seams are the same as they are on the front, as well as kind of it's a mess. It needs to be cleaned up. I'll probably end up using some bleach and some water to take it off, but you know, it's gonna be a big project. So for now, the body can stay in the workshop. Alright, well that's been a long week. So I started working on this last Saturday. Here we are Friday night, finally finishing up recording. We'll talk about what's coming next on the project. So the goal is to get this kind of streetable driving as a kit without the body on it. To do that, you need to go through the car top to bottom, check the bolts, check the suspension, make sure that everything's tight, everything's torqued down correctly, nothing's missing. After that, we're gonna spend some time adjusting the suspension, then we're gonna install the battery cable for it, which goes in the front. We need to run a battery cable from the front all the way to the back. After that, gonna work on the brake system, the fluid and the clutch system. So both are hydraulic, need to fill them up. I need to figure out how to work on a hydraulic clutch for our Porsche to get this to work. So we're gonna have to find some instructions on that. After that, we gotta work on the engine and transmission fluid. A lot of the engine back here, transmission fluid, hasn't been changed in 10 plus years, so that needs to be sorted out. Then we're gonna move to the cooling system. Make sure that we have fluid, there's no leaks in it. I think we need to put the coolant tank on the front. Then we're gonna wire the chassis. So a lot of the chassis wiring goes in the front of the steering wheel. The engine wiring, which we'll do next, goes in the back here. Looking at the chassis wiring box, you can see it's gonna be a big project figuring out where all these wires go, make sure they're mounted correctly on the vehicle and everything is functional. After that, we need to work on the shifter linkage and install that. The shifter's not mounted in the front. We need to make sure the linkage in the back works. Then we need to get the exhaust on the car and then finish up the fuel system. For the fuel system, we're installing an aeromotive kit that my friend had with the car. So that'll be installed. And then after that, we're gonna start it, go for a ride. Well, that's it. Thanks for tuning in on Smackey's Garage for this project. You know, we're gonna be working on this, but the 69 Mustang, we have a lot of projects coming up on that over the winter as well. So you're gonna get more videos on the 69, but these will be sprinkled in with it as we're finishing it. I think there's what I'm learning as I've been working on this car for this week is with kit cars, there's a lot of times when you're waiting for parts where you need to go out and get some bolts, nuts, things to fit to make the car work. So each project that I've started so far in the car, I've had to stop or go run out and get something, but that's the nature of working with a kit car. Thanks for tuning in to Smackey's Garage. I'll see you next week.